Hello, I'm so honoured to be back with Tonia Burrow from Alaska and Bali, yoga instructor extraordinaire, and today we're in Byron Bay and we're talking today about translocation of the microbiome. The good bacteria in one area of the body might not be good if it gets in another area of the body, particularly if you're worried about autoimmune disease and cancer. And Tonia and I are also going to be talking about the role of anatomical variance in yoga and other exercise, why Greg might never be able to get his ankle behind his neck in yoga. So if you're interested, let's get started. Hi, I'm Dr. Greg Emerson, and this YouTube channel, as usual, is about using modern science to validate traditional health practices. If you like the video you're about to see, make sure you subscribe, make sure you hit the little bell button so you get notification of the videos coming out. Tonia and I will be doing lots of videos, particularly about yoga, meditation, and pranayama, breath work, and the role of health and fitness in today's 21st century health problems. We'll also be discussing some of the latest scientific research which validates a lot of our traditional health practices. And today I really want to talk about a new study out which was looking at the microbiome of the gut and its role in prostate cancer, because we've now discovered that some of the organisms in the microbiome of the gut, their role is in metabolizing estrogen, and if you don't have an adequate microbiome, then you don't adequately metabolize estrogen, and because estrogen makes things grow, then in men that will cause overgrowth of the prostate and ultimately lead to an enlarged prostate and eventually perhaps prostate cancer. So the role of the microbiome is very important, but what we're discovering is that if the organisms which are really good for your gut might not necessarily be good if they get to another part of the body. And we now know the skin has its own microbiome, the lungs have their own microbiome, the gut has its own microbiome, the vagina has its own microbiome, and interestingly, research came out about 3 weeks ago showing that the fetal gut, has an established microbiome at about 4 or 5 months while it's still in the uterus, because we traditionally thought that the fetal microbiome was established as it was born and passed out through the vagina, but now we've discovered it's got a microbiome a few months old while it's still in the uterus. So we're discovering more and more about the microbiome and its importance. But it's very important to understand that all microbiomes are not the same. You and I have a different microbiome, but also the microbiome of our skin obviously is very different to the microbiome of our gut. And we're finding that if our microbiome from one place gets displaced to another place in the body, what's good for us in one place is bad for us in another place. And you and I have been discussing, I think it's Glenn Villeneuve who lives in Alaska, and he was in the TV series Life Below Zero. And he was talking about how he never eats bears because of the parasite burden of bears. Now these parasites which live in the intestinal tract of bears don't cause the bears many problems. They're just there for free feed. But if he eats a bear and gets the same parasite, that parasite gets incredibly confused about its new host and goes, I don't even know where I am anymore. And so instead of staying in the gut, it ends up in the brain and the eyes of humans and causes terrible disease that it doesn't cause in any bear. And the same thing, if your gut microbiome gets translocated from the gut into your bloodstream, we now know, because you've got a leaky gut, whether that be from antibiotics or chlorine or mercury or parasites or yeast or other bacterial infections, and your gut wall gets inflamed and you leak the microbiome gut into the bloodstream, it then goes to another part of the body through the bloodstream or the lymphatics and goes to the heart and might cause heart disease, or it might trigger an immune response and you end up with an autoimmune disease. And we now know that the more we study, the more we've got genetic testing and DNA testing of organisms, we're finding that a lot more cancers that we thought were caused actually by chronic infections in the body. we've always known about HPV and hepatitis virus, but now we're finding a whole lot of other infections which persist in the body, including Epstein-Barr virus, are now being blamed for what causes the toxic environment that ultimately leads to the mutation in the mitochondria of the cell in its desperate attempt for survival. So the take-home message is that we want to look after our microbiomes, but they're all different, and we've got to make sure that they don't get transported to one area of the body, which is again is why a lot of people believe that gut health is the start of all health systems, and it is very important that we keep our gut healthy so our microbiome doesn't end up somewhere else. Our gut microbiome doesn't end up somewhere else in the body and doesn't end up causing high estrogen, which then causes prostate cancer. Now that's also that anatomical individuality is also very relevant to you and I shared love of yoga, in that especially when I was training with you, it was nice to see the images that you showed of the pelvis and the greater trochanter of the femur, showing that individual variability in anatomy will preclude some people from ever doing some of the asanas. Can you run us through that a little bit more about what that's all about?
Okay, so the gut to bone morphology.
Yes, it's a good jump.
It's a good jump.
It's a good
right?
segue.
And it's a really good segue into one size does not fit all. And the individuality and the variance from individual to individual, from everything, from the structures of our bones, the shapes of our joints, all the way to our guts and the enteric nervous system. And just the fact alone, gut health, so important. And we think about even the endocrine system and the hormones, 90% of your serotonin is produced in the gut. So when I think of just simple, time-held wisdom, good hydration, good sleep, regular exercise, right? Mm-hmm. When I think of the gut, those are the first things I think of. I also think of the vagus nerve. I also have a lot of other different thoughts, but when we talk about yoga and individuality, now we're talking about bone variance, which we have. We talk about the thigh bone, right? The femur, and the acetabulum, which is essentially this concave structure that holds the head, the greater trochanter of the femur. And we're talking about how every single person has a completely different shape of their femur, the angle. How deep is the angle? Which way does it face? How deep is this joint capsule? Is it really shallow? And that is going to dictate how people do any of the yoga asanas, the actual physical postures. So we have this idea that one size fits all for our yoga postures, our asanas. And that is what I think is a completely wrong direction, the perspective to take. What we should be doing is looking at our body, finding the asana or the posture's priority. What is its intention? And then person to person, individualize these asanas and these postures per person. So just like your microbiome, your bones, your muscles, your experiences, meaning any injuries that you've had, any micro traumas that you've had, you get into a car accident 10 years ago, but there were no injuries, you slip on the ice. A few weeks ago, we were talking about this article that we both read recently, and how our individual histories, and then from an anatomical perspective, the shapes of our bones, our connective tissue, including ligaments, the tendons, the fascia, and then our muscles. So they're like an individual fingerprint. They're all so different. And so one of the reasons for why you can't get your ankle behind your neck, it could be all sorts of things. It could be tension of the muscles are not long enough, the connective tissue, maybe you're stiff, maybe you have old injuries, or it could be bone morphology, meaning that the shape of your femur and the joints are going to be in such a way that they will never allow your leg to move in that direction. Whereas someone else, a Chinese contortionist, no problem, foot behind, both of them, and walk on their hands. And that is easily achievable, right?
And it doesn't matter how many hours a day I train for, how many years, I'm never going to be able to do it. It's just dynamics, just bone growth. You can't make a bone move through a bone.
No, not without injuring yourself,
Yes.
for sure.
Yeah.
So there are people out there who will never be able to achieve the splits, no matter how much they practice, who will never be able to achieve lotus pose, right? That's just, and it's not the point. What's the intention? External rotation of the hip? You can still achieve that without ever going into these picture perfect postures. They're not even really the point of yoga, and flexibility is not even the point of yoga. It's strengthening and flexibility together equally. It's full range of movement, and then it has all of these other beautiful byproducts. You have the union with the breath and the movement. So asana, the physical posture, is just a small part of yoga, right? So we have pranayama and meditation, and then the physical asana is really just to prepare us to sit down for our meditation. But really, in that movement, that continuous process of your yoga class, you have the respiration, so inspiration, respiration, and then movement. So lengthening, creating space in the body, and strengthening simultaneously. And then we are doing our pranayama, and then hopefully we're sitting down for some meditation. Otherwise, we could count the asana class as a moving meditation, but so nice to finish up your moving meditation with actually a few moments of meditation if you can. And we talk about all the benefits for that, the nervous system. We talk about the endocrine system, which is your hormones, so affecting the gut, your microbiome, absolutely. And then just that age-old wisdom. Stay hydrated, get good sleep, and regular exercise, right? So we're talking about bone morphology, creating individual bodies that will never be replicated. And we're talking about individual, unique yoga for every unique body instead of that one size fits all. And so when you say you can't put your ankle behind your neck, I say, good, great. Yoga is just as beneficial for you as it is for the person who can. And it actually makes no difference whether you can or cannot. The benefit, long term, is what matters.
All right, thank you so much. So in summary, 1, look after your microbiome of your gut. Just make sure it doesn't get to a different part of your body. And 2, Greg shouldn't be disappointed that he can't do the splits because he's got an anatomically individual femur and pelvis bone that I'm never going to be able to change. So if you've liked today's information, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the bell. You can also support me on my Patreon page where I write much more detailed articles, and there are also some unique videos there. And we also go on cold thermogenesis trips, learning how to control our nervous system in extreme environments. And thanks for watching.